The day Samuel Walker pushed open the cafe door, nothing about him looked dangerous. His clothes were plain, his boots worn, and his shoulders tired from a lifetime of carrying more weight than most men could endure. Yet the moment he stepped inside, every head quietly turned, sensing a story behind his eyes. Samuel just wanted a simple breakfast, something warm, something human, but fate had decided this morning would become the first spark of a fire that had been building for years. Before we dive into this incredible story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today, and if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe. Samuel stood just inside the threshold, adjusting to the dim, sleepy light of the cafe. The place smelled of burnt coffee and stale biscuits, the kind of scent that clung to old memories like stubborn shadows. He had been on the road for hours, walking from town to town in search of work, any work, after being told once again that his kind wasn't welcome anywhere nearby. His stomach twisted with hunger, but he forced his posture to remain steady. Discipline had carried him through battlefields far worse than this diner's silence. As he approached the counter, he offered the smallest, most polite nod to the only worker in sight, a young man wiping down plates with nervous focus. But the moment the owner, Gerald Thompson, stepped out from the back room, the atmosphere shifted sharply. Gerald's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening as if Samuel's very presence offended the structure of his world. Samuel felt the hostility before the man even spoke, a cold wave washing over him. All Samuel wanted was a quiet meal, nothing more, but it was clear he had just walked into a place where dignity came at a price. Gerald walked forward with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in his life. His apron was spotless, his hair combed sharply back, giving him a polished cruelty that didn't need words to be understood. "We don't serve drifters," he snapped before Samuel could even greet him. The room froze. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Forks hovered above plates. Samuel inhaled slowly, forcing down the instinctive flare of frustration. He had faced men far more dangerous than Gerald. Men with weapons. Men who hunted shadows at night. Yet somehow this man's venom felt more personal. "I'm not a drifter," Samuel replied, voice calm but heavy. "Just hungry." Gerald scoffed loudly, looking Samuel up and down with a sneer that seemed rehearsed. "Same difference," he muttered. "Try the next town over. You'll fit better there." The young worker behind him shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flicking between the two men as though silently begging Gerald to stop. But the cafe owner was just getting started. He leaned in close enough for Samuel to catch the bitter scent of old cigars. "You hear me? We don't want trouble here. People like you always bring trouble." Inside Samuel, something tightened. Samuel's hands curled slowly into fists, not in anger, but in restraint. For years, he had practiced silence as a form of self-preservation. He knew what happened when men like Gerald were challenged. They didn't back down, they escalated. "Sir," Samuel said carefully, "all I want is breakfast. I'll pay. Then I'll be on my way." His voice was steady, but his eyes carried the tired ache of someone who had fought too many invisible battles. Gerald laughed, an ugly, sharp sound that seemed to slice through the air. "You think money is the issue?" he barked. "I don't want your money. I don't want you in here at all." Gasps drifted through the cafe. Even a morning sun filtering through the dusty window seemed to recoil. Samuel took a step back, not in fear, but in disappointment. He had survived war zones, stood shoulder to shoulder with soldiers who trusted him with their lives, only to come home to this, to a place where a meal became a battleground. His chest rose and fell slowly. "You don't know anything about me," he said quietly. Gerald's smirk deepened, sharp as broken glass. "I know enough," he answered, "and that's all I need." Silence clamped down on the cafe, thick and oppressive. The young worker, Eli, hesitated, then stepped forward with a small plate of toast he had prepared earlier. His hands trembled as he offered it to Samuel. "Sir, you can have this," Eli murmured, voice barely audible. Gerald spun toward him with a fury, so sudden the entire cafe flinched. "Put that down," he barked. Eli froze instantly, the plate shaking in his grip. Gerald jabbed a finger at Samuel. He leaves? Now. Samuel's gaze drifted to the plate, the simple kindness trembling in Eli's hands. It reminded him of the way young soldiers used to look at him, unsure, afraid, but trying to do the right thing. "It's okay, son," Samuel said softly. He stepped back again, now inches from the door. But just as he reached for the handle, Gerald's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Yeah, walk away. It's what cowards do." The insult struck deeper than Gerald intended. Not because Samuel believed it, but because Gerald had no idea, no understanding of the man he had just tried to break. Samuel paused with his back to the room, shoulders stiffening. Memories surged, dusty battlefields, explosions tearing the sky apart, men crying out for help that he had been strong enough to give. Coward. The word echoed through his mind like a false accusation. He turned around slowly, not with rage, but with an unshakable steadiness. His voice was calm, too calm. "You don't know me," he repeated. "If you did, that's the last word you'd use." Gerald waved a dismissive hand. "Save your speeches. Just get out." Samuel's eyes met Eli's, wide, apologetic, silently pleading for this to end. Samuel nodded once, accepting the cruelty he could not change. As he stepped outside, the cafe door closed behind him with a hollow thud that felt final. But destiny wasn't done with this place. Because while Gerald believed he had chased away just another face he didn't care to understand, he had no idea who Samuel really was, and even less idea who Samuel's son was becoming. And soon, that ignorance would cost him everything. Samuel walked away from the cafe with heavy steps, each one carrying the residue of Gerald's words like grains of sand grinding beneath his ribs. He had learned long ago that cruelty left marks, but never where others could see them. As he reached the end of the street, he paused beneath an aging oak tree, letting its shade fall over him like a momentary refuge. The wind rustled its branches, reminding him of home, of a distant life where mornings had once been simple. He sat down slowly, lowering himself to the cracked bench beneath the tree. His thoughts drifted to his son, Jordan, the one bright thread woven through a life filled with darker colors. Jordan had always believed in justice, always pushed back against the ugliness Samuel had learned to navigate carefully. Samuel wondered what his son would say if he saw what had happened. Probably something fierce, something brave, something Samuel admired but feared. "You raised him that way," Samuel murmured to himself, exhaling a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Maybe that wasn't such a bad thing after all. Maybe courage came in different forms, some loud, some quiet, all necessary. Inside the cafe, Eli struggled to keep his breathing steady. The plates he washed clattered softly, far more than usual, betraying the tremor in his hands. Gerald stood nearby, smug and certain, wiping down the counter as if he had accomplished something admirable. The other customers whispered among themselves, their voices thick with unease. Eli's mind replayed Samuel's face, the calm dignity, the quiet strength, the way he accepted cruelty without throwing any back. It made Eli's chest tighten. When Gerald caught him staring out the window toward the street, he snapped, "Get back to work." Eli nodded quickly, but the guilt clung to him like a stain that wouldn't wash out. He'd always wanted to believe the world was fair, or that people could at least choose kindness when it mattered. But moments like this forced him to confront a truth he hated. Sometimes good men walked away hungry, while bad men were applauded. As he reached for another plate, his reflection in the metal sink caught his eye. He barely recognized the expression staring back, fear mixed with a growing sense of obligation. Something had shifted inside him, though he didn't yet know what it would cost. Across town, Jordan Walker stepped out of the small community center, where he volunteered every morning. His phone buzzed with a message from a friend who worked near the cafe. Something happened with an old guy. Ona made a scene. Jordan frowned, instinctively sensing the weight buried between the words. He slipped his phone into his pocket and began walking, long strides echoing with purpose. Jordan had built a reputation, someone who stood up when others stayed silent, someone unafraid to challenge the comfortable cruelty that others overlooked. But he was also Samuel's son, raised on stories of resilience and restraint. The combination made him a force most people didn't see coming. As he approached the café from down the street, he noticed the uneasy tension clinging to the building like fog. The front windows reflected the morning light, hiding what lay inside. Jordan paused at the door, fingers hovering just over the handle. A strange stillness settled around him, as though the day itself were holding its breath. He didn't yet know his father had been the target, but he felt something in his bones, something wrong, something demanding to be set right. Back under the oak tree, Samuel lifted his hands and stared at the faint scars along his knuckles. Invisible lines mapped the story of a younger man, one who had fought with everything he had, one who had believed he could protect everyone he loved. A small ache pulsed behind his ribs as he remembered the day Jordan was born, tiny fingers curling around his own with fearless trust. That memory had always been his anchor, the thing that kept him from falling apart on the darkest days. He wondered if Jordan would be heading to work by now. The thought made him smile faintly. Jordan always carried himself with a fire Samuel admired, something steady and bright. But Samuel also feared it. Fire could burn, especially in a world eager to strike matches. As he stood to leave, brushing dust from his pants, a voice called from behind him. "Sir," it was Eli, hurrying toward him, breathless, clutching the plate of toast wrapped awkwardly in foil. I'm sorry about what happened," the young man stammered, his cheeks flushed. "You didn't deserve that." Samuel looked at the offering, then at the trembling hands holding it. For the first time that morning, warmth flickered in his chest. Samuel accepted the foil-wrapped toast slowly, almost ceremonially. "Thank you," he said, his voice warm yet tinged with something deeper, an echo of long battles fought for moments like this. Eli nodded quickly, as though relieved to have fulfilled a duty his own conscience demanded. "I shouldn't have let him talk to you like that," Eli added, eyes downcast. Samuel shook his head gently. "You showed kindness. That matters more than anything," he said. Eli swallowed hard, emotions gathering behind his eyes. Before either could speak again, the distant sound of footsteps approached, quick, purposeful, familiar. Samuel lifted his head just as Jordan stepped into view, his expression shifting instantly at the sight of his father standing beneath the oak. Confusion gave way to concern. Concern sharpened into anger. "Dad, what happened?" Jordan asked, voice low but trembling with restrained fire. Samuel hesitated, but the moment a flicker of pain crossed his face, Jordan understood enough. He turned slowly toward the café, jaw tightening, eyes darkening with intent. Samuel tried to speak, tried to steady him, but the storm had already begun forming behind Jordan's eyes. And once set in motion, storms rarely turn back. The world seemed to tilt for a moment, as though the weight of what was coming pressed down on the town itself. A quiet storm gathered, silent, inevitable, and shaped by the truth Gerald Thompson was about to face. Jordan stared at the café with a stillness that carried more danger than any raised voice. The muscles in his jaw tightened as he took in every detail: the smudged windows, the faded sign, the door his father had walked through only to be humiliated. Samuel reached out, placing a gentle hand on his son's shoulder, a silent plea for calm. But Jordan's fire had already been lit. "Dad, you shouldn't have to deal with this," he whispered, each word edged with controlled fury. Samuel looked at him, really looked, and for a moment saw the boy he used to be, the boy who once cried when he found a hurt stray dog, because pain offended him on a fundamental level. That softness had hardened, sharpened over the years, but it still came from the same place: love. "Let's just go home," Samuel said softly. But Jordan shook his head. "Not yet." He stepped forward, and as he walked toward the café, something old and unspoken passed between father and son, a shared understanding that some moments define a man's character, and others reveal it. Inside, Gerald was busy boasting to a pair of regulars, waving his hands dramatically as he reenacted his version of the morning. How he handled a troublemaker, how he protected his business. Eli stood in silence nearby, each word from the owner twisting the knife in his conscience. The bell above the door chimed as Jordan entered, and the room shifted instantly, as though instinctively recognizing the shift in gravity. Jordan moved with quiet purpose, no shouting, no theatrics, just presence, strong, unyielding, dangerous in its calm. Gerald glanced up, irritation flickering across his face. "We're not hiring," he said without even fully looking at Jordan. Jordan didn't respond. He closed the distance slowly until he stood directly in front of the counter. Then he leaned forward slightly, voice low. "You threw my father out this morning." The cafe fell silent. Gerald scoffed, puffing out his chest as if preparing for another performance. "Oh, that old guy? Yeah, not my problem." Eli's stomach dropped. He saw the way Jordan's eyes darkened, not with rage, but with something heavier, something Gerald didn't yet understand. "It is now," Jordan said softly. Gerald stepped back, confused by the sudden shift in power he couldn't explain. "Look," he began, hands lifting defensively if he caused trouble. Jordan cut him off with a single, sharp shake of his head. "My father doesn't cause trouble. He spent his entire life protecting people, even people who would never protect him." Those words struck the cafe like a physical blow. Jordan continued, voice steady but weighted with memory. "He served this country. He bled for it. Came home with scars so deep they don't ever fully heal. And you? You treated him like he was nothing." Gerald's face paled as the pieces began clicking together, too slowly. "He's your father?" Jordan nodded once. "And you humiliated him for trying to buy breakfast." Gerald opened his mouth, but no words came. Shame flickered across the faces of the customers who had watched silently earlier, their complicity settling in like dust. Eli stepped forward suddenly, unable to stay quiet any longer. "Jordan, I tried to help him. I really did." Jordan turned to him, eyes softening. "I know. Thank you." For the first time, Eli felt seen. Jordan turned back to Gerald, who now stood trembling behind the counter. The man who had seemed so large, so confident in his cruelty, now appeared small, overwhelmed by a truth he had never prepared to face. "You think strength is bullying someone weaker?" Jordan asked, his voice carrying the weight of all the moments Samuel had swallowed in silence. "Real strength is the kind my father showed today, walking away instead of crushing you with the truth." The cafe remained still. Even the hum of the refrigerator felt muted, as though the entire room awaited judgment. Gerald's eyes darted around, searching for support, but no one stepped forward. Not a single customer nodded. Not a single voice defended him. Eli took a small breath. "Mr. Thompson, you were wrong. He didn't deserve that." Gerald flinched as if struck. Samuel, watching through the window, felt both sorrow and pride rising in his chest. Jordan wasn't here to fight. He was here to reveal the truth, to force the world to look at the quiet dignity it had tried to dismiss. Jordan stepped back slowly, letting the full weight of the moment settle. "My father forgives people who don't deserve it," he said quietly. "But that doesn't mean he forgets." Then, with a final, steady look, he turned and walked toward the door. When he stepped outside, Samuel was waiting. Their eyes met, one filled with gratitude, the other with love. Samuel placed a hand on Jordan's shoulder. "You didn't have to do that," he murmured. Jordan shook his head. "I did." As they walked away together, Eli stepped out from the cafe, watching them with a newfound sense of responsibility and hope. Behind him, Gerald sank into a chair, silence swallowing the space where arrogance once lived. For the first time, he saw himself clearly. And he didn't like what he saw. Father and son continued down the street, their shadows stretching long behind them. Two figures bound by pain, strength, and unspoken understanding. The storm had passed, but its lesson remained. Some men lead with fear. Others lead with example. Samuel had spent his life choosing the latter, and now the world was finally beginning to see it. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe for more.